Let's discuss how you can destroy weak players in no limit Texas Hold'em with three bets. To be very clear, a three bet is a re-raise. When someone raises, so let's say three big blinds, and you re-raise to 9 big blinds, 10 big blinds, 8 big blinds, whatever the amount, that is referred to as a three bet. It says nothing about the size of the re-raise. It is just the third bet. The big blind is the first bet, the initial raise is the second bet, and the re-raise is a three bet. Recognize that when you observe someone playing poorly or weakly, that's fine and good, but it is useless unless you focus on exploiting them and increasing your aggression with good, strong, fundamentally sound tactics. If you play straightforwardly against weak players, you are going to leave a lot of money on the table. Three betting, pre-flop, is the absolute best way to take advantage of these players because, in general, they are going to fold a little bit too often. Whenever they raise, they'll raise with perhaps a reasonable range, but they will not call often enough, and they will not four-bet or re-raise often enough, and that's going to allow you to push these players around. If you three-bet these players and isolate them, you will crush them, both pre-flop and post-flop with these generally aggressive strategies. Many weak players are trying their best to risk a small amount of money to try to make a good hand. A lot of these players raise with ranges that are actually too wide, thinking, all right, I'm going to put in a raise, I'm going to try to make a good hand on the flop, and I'm going to go from there. If you notice someone raising with queen 10 offsuit or 8-6 suited from early position, you should be three betting these players with a strong or perhaps even medium strength range, because that's going to put them in a tough spot. I mean, imagine you raise with queen 10 offsuit and someone re-raises. You don't really like it. You have to fold. Their range in this scenario cannot withstand aggression, and that's especially the case when they are going to be out of position. So you want to three bet and isolate them. By three betting, you are much more likely to get the pot heads up against the weak player, and that's going to allow you to navigate post-flop well and generally just win the pot post-flop far more often than your cards dictate. Because when your opponent flops nothing and you bet, they're usually just going to fold. If you instead just call these players raises, that allows for all the players yet to act, especially those in the blinds, to come along as well. And when a lot of players see the flop, someone is likely to flop something. And if it's not you, well, it's probably one of your opponents, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Whenever you play very multi-way pots, you're really just relying on the strength of your cards. But when you are playing against only one player, whenever you miss and your opponent misses, you're going to be the one to win the pots with your aggression. So you want to maximize your edge by keeping the pot just between you and the weak player. I know it may be tempting to call a raise with a, decently strong but non-premium hand, because quite often that is the game theory optimal strategy if your opponent plays perfectly. But if your opponent will fold too often, you want to be re-raising them far more than the game theory optimal strategy. We're going to take a look at that in just a second. And you especially want to focus on isolating these players when you are in position. So like we said, many weak players do not like folding, even to three bets. They raise with a wide range, call the three bet, and then go from there. Also, they will rarely four bet you, which makes three betting way better. A big downside of three betting in general is that it reopens the action and allows the initial raiser to then four bet you when they feel inclined. But if they will rarely four bet you as a bluff, and they'll really only four bet like aces, kings, queens, and ace king, that's fine, because all the hands you re-raise are not doing so well against aces, kings, queens, and ace king anyway, and that will allow you to get out of the pot. Re-raising also allows you to build a bigger pot with your strong but non-premium hands like ace queen or ace 10 suited or king jack suited. And that's good, because these hands are generally going to crush the calling range of your opponent. When they four bet you, king jack suited is no good. But when they just call, king jack suited is actually pretty nice. So you don't have to worry about having to fold these hands to a four bet, because these players don't four bet bluff adequately. CoinPoker is giving away $250,000 in prizes, including a $100,000 career poker package to the winner of their championship final table. The Coin Masters promotion starts on April 13th. Head over to pokercoaching.com/coinpoker right now for more information and to get in the game. Weak players also have two very important post-flop leaks that you can take advantage of. For the most part, these players play a very face-up strategy. It is usually crystal clear when they like their hand and when they don't. When they like their hand, they bet or raise. And when they don't, they check and call or check and fold. These players will rarely bluff you, which again allows you to generally be aggressive, because when you bet and get raised, you know they have a very strong hand that usually has most of your non-premium range crushed. Also, these players will usually overfold to pressure. If you study game theory optimal strategies at peakgto.com, you will see that quite often against small bets, you have to stick around a lot. You cannot justify folding much of anything unless it has no value whatsoever when you're facing a small bet. But a lot of your weak opponents will fold out hands like an overcard with a backdoor flush draw or a bad gut shot straight draw to a small bet, and that's going to result in lots of little pots being pushed your direction that you should not naturally be capturing. So this allows you to 3-bet, play larger pots against these players, and steal those larger pots post-flop more often with your bluffs than you should be able to. Now, something that gives a lot of people trouble when they are 3-betting aggressively is that when you do make a marginal hand and this weak player decides to show some aggression, maybe they check raise you on the flop, or you let it go check on the flop and your weak opponent bets the turn and then blasts the river, they're saying they have something pretty good. So you need to fold against someone who does not bluff often enough and who takes aggressive lines only with their best hands or almost entirely with their best hands. That allows you to overfold because they are not going to be bluffing. Their range to put lots of money in the pot is very, very strong. Remember, these players are playing the Queen 10 offsuit and the 8-6 suited to try to get a good hand, have somebody put money in the pot post-flop, have the player with the drawy type hand load the money in when they actually make the nuts, and then get paid off. Your job is to not pay them off. You're going to try to win lots of small and medium pots from these players with your aggression, and 3-betting is the first step to that. Also, 3-betting allows you to take the initiative. Weak players are constantly worried about running into premium hands when they get 3-bet because they presume that you are going to play like they do. They do not think you're going to be 3-betting 10-9 suited, ace-5 suited, ace-10 offsuit, pocket eights, etc. So if you do 3-bet more often and they are going to incorrectly put you on a very strong preflop range, like 9s and better and ace-queen and better, a simple flop continuation bet is going to take down the pot a lot against these players because they're going to think your range is far stronger than it is. And then if you do have hands like 10-9 suited or pocket eights in your range, when you do flop a very strong hand, your opponents may not necessarily even suspect those holdings, which may allow you to get paid off a ton when you do make a strong hand, which is another added benefit. Position is everything when you are focused on exploiting players. But even still, 3-betting them often from out of position will do decently well. However, when you're on the button, that's when you really want to get out of line and 3-bet a ton because you know you're going to have the best position throughout the pot and you're going to be able to crush these weak players. Let's take a look at two charts. Here we have the button strategy. When you are facing a cutoff RFI, a cutoff raise, meaning everyone folds to the cutoff and they raise to 3 big blinds, 100 big blinds deep in a cash game. Notice these charts are kind of tight. That's because they presume there's no ante in the pot, like in a tournament, and it also presumes a rake is coming out of each pot. Whenever that's the case, you have to play pretty tight. You can't get away with being overly insane. That said, let's take a look at this. The hands in red are re-raising to 10 big blinds, the hands in green are calling, and the hands in blue are folding. Now, most players 3-bet aces, kings, queens, jacks, 10s, and ace-king. They get that part right. But then, this is a situation where a lot of players do not 3-bet nearly often enough with this range, the weaker hands in this polarized range, like some suited aces. King 8 suited, king 7 suited, queen 9 suited, 10-9 suited, 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited. And that results in their 3-betting range being a little bit too strong. And to be fair, if your 3-betting range is a little too strong, your opponent should be folding a lot. They're supposed to overfold if your range is too strong. Also, a lot of people call hands like king, queen, ace, jack, king, jack, and ace 10. But instead, you should be 3-betting those a decent amount of the time. And in reality, if you think the cutoff's going to raise too wide and then fold too often to 3-bets, all of these hands that are mixing, like 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited, 10-9 suited, king-8 suited, they very often will be able to 3-bet even more profitably as a bluff. You can 3-bet more than this 8.57% of your total range. You may bump it up to something like 12% or 15% if your opponent's going to be folding too often, especially if you know how they are going to play poorly. Alternatively, if your opponent's going to raise preflop and then call a 3-bet every time, because they're just sticky, now you're going to want to 3-bet more value hands, perhaps something like pocket 7s and better, maybe ace 10 suited and better, maybe king jack suited, and queen jack suited, and king queen suited, and these offsuit hands that are in this region, ace queen, king queen, ace jack, king jack, and ace 10. And perhaps you want to shy away from 3-betting these drawing type hands, because if your opponent's never going to fold to the 3-bet, well, you don't really want to have the king 7 suited or the 6-5 suited, right? So always adjust to take advantage of what your particular opponents are doing incorrectly. But as a general exploit, you do want to be bumping up your 3-betting range against most players who have a wide range that they're going to play in a cautious manner if they do get re-raised. Now, if your opponent's going to play perfectly, which is not the case, you should use, well, the game theory optimal strategy. If your opponent plays perfectly, leaning on game theory optimal strategies is the way to go, and anything your opponent does that is different from the game theory optimal strategy will make you little bits of money. But the way you win a lot of money is by figuring out what your opponent's doing correctly and then massively exploiting them. Let's take a look at how you should play from the small blind against a button range. Now, instead of re-raising with a polarized range of your best hands and your hands that are barely playable, now you're going to be 3-betting with what's referred to as a linear range, which is mostly just your best hands. So notice we are 3-betting pocket 6s and better, lots of suited Broadway hands, some ace-x suited, a few suited connectors and gappers, and ace-queen, king-queen, ace-jack, and ace-10 offsuit. While we're calling with some suited aces, some suited connected stuff, and some pairs. Okay? Now, how should you play if the initial raiser is going to, let's say, call 3-bets too often? Let's say if they make it 3, you make it 10, and they're going to call with almost everything. Well, you're already 3-betting pretty much all the best hands. But you want to chill out a little bit and not 3-bet so often with the drawing hands. Perhaps, some ace-x suited, some of these suited connectors. You may want to call with more suited connectors, like 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited. Maybe the small pairs, because these hands are all going to flop decently well. And that's especially true if the player in the big blind is not going to 3-bet often enough either. In most cash games, when somebody raises the button and the small blind calls, the big blind usually plays very straightforwardly. So that allows you to call in the small blind with just drawing type hands. But you do still want to be putting in the 3-bet with a lot of the best hands, because the button's initial raising range should naturally be quite wide. They should be raising something like 40% of the time, assuming they're playing the game theory optimal strategy. And a lot of players mistakenly raise with more like 50% of their range or 60% of their range. And by 3-betting them, you force them to either call with a bunch of junk or fold far too often. And either way, 3-betting more often is going to work out really, really well for you. That's it for today. If you enjoyed today's video, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button down below. Click the notification bell. If you have a friend who doesn't really 3-bet very often, they just want to call and see the flop, show them this video. It may change their poker trajectory. To be clear, you want to 3-bet more often to punish weak players' initial raises, to isolate them so that you get all the action to yourself, to exploit their general weak tendencies, both pre-flop and post-flop, and to take the initiative, which will allow you to win far more than your fair share of the pots. The best way to crush weak players is to increase your aggression, and an easy step to do that right off the bat before the flop is to 3-bet.